Hello everyone. In this tutorial video, I will show you how to construct a sports bra from already made patterns. What will be important about this is I will also show you how to create from scratch some breast pads to then layer inside the sports bra. So here I already have my avatar. I will then load my sports bra patterns, which have been saved as DXF file format. If you would like to use the same files, you will be able to download it through the link below the video. So I will add it to the workspace by doing a right click on the file and then select the proper options. So I will load type as add, scale I will keep at auto scale, and in terms of the options right here, I will not need the annotation, and I'm just going to make sure to swap cutting line and sewing lines if I have some seam allowance. In the case of this file, seam allowance has not been added. So in any case, it will not really matter whether those options are ticked. Same for this one, last one, the convert to seam allowance. I will keep it, but it will not be necessary for this file. I will press OK, and here the patterns will appear. So if we are looking into how to read those patterns, so we will have multiple layers that will go below the first shell layer. So here we have our shell layer, here we have the second layer, and here we have the third. So the padding will come between the third and the second layer. As you see on the third layer, you have a little opening that is quite frequently there when you're looking into construction details of sports bra. So first thing first is to start to place some of the patterns around the avatar with the arrangement points. So I will not place everything at once. I'm going to work from one layer to the next. So I will get started with the first layer. So the two others, I will select them and I will freeze them. So once they're selected, with your transform pattern tool, you can then click right on one of the layer and select the option freeze. We can then place all of those layers on the side so that they don't disturb us when we're going to use the arrangement points. Then zoom in onto the avatar in the 3D window and do Shift F to bring the arrangement points. Or if you do not want to use the shortcut, you can also find it here. And then we can start to place our patterns. So I will place my front right here. Then I will place here my sides and select one and place it on the side right here. I can then, if I want to move it on the arrangement point, then go down when the pattern is still selected and change the position Y and X. So I can change the position X and a little bit of the position Y so that it's aligned with the front pattern. And I can do the same on the other side. So I will change the position X and then change the position Y. I can then place those small parts on top of the shoulder like this. Move them again if necessary or change their rotation. And then place the back. So I will select the back piece and place it on the arrangement point that is in the middle of the back of the avatar. Then finally, the waistband, I will select it and place it on the front, the arrangement point that is located on the front of the avatar. And I will move this one up a little bit more. Once I have my first base arranged, I can now hide my arrangement point and then start the sewing. So I will use my sewing tools in the 2D window and get started with it. So I will start with the segment sewing and stitch the sides like this, and here too. I will then stitch here and here, and finally on the side. If you feel it to be easier to do it in 3D, you can also stitch in the 3D window. And then I am just missing my waistband. And here we are. Then I can also close the waistband so that it doesn't fall when I simulate. And if necessary, go back into your selection tool and bring the pattern a little bit closer to the body so that here the sewing lines are not crossing the body, so that afterwards when we simulate, it is stable. So once that is done, then we can do our first simulation by pressing on this arrow or on our spacebar. And here we go. We have the first base of our bra. I can readjust it with my mouse to make sure that it's properly aligned with the body, or that at least it drapes or sits well. So once I've placed this first layer, I can then get started on the second layer. So I will get started, I will do all of the layers at once, one after the other, and then we'll start to consider the breast pad. So for the second layer, I will not use the arrangement point, as this will be easier to use a superimpose function. So I'm going to basically start to stitch everything and then superimpose under. So I will get started with my free sewing. So I will take the free sewing tool and then get started by stitching the edges together. So here I'm going to start with this one, which will use the technique 1 to M to stitch this one long segment with those multiple ones. So I will go ahead and do it. Here press shift and then stitch everything around and then release the shift key. Because this pattern piece is going to be placed underneath the shell, I'm going to make sure to change the sewing line type here to turn. And this will be done for most of the sewing actually, because there will always be layers underneath. So I'm going to stitch now the side here and there. Again, change the sewing line type here to turn. And then the bottom piece here with my shift key again, and then stitch everything together and release the shift key. And here, and change the sewing line type to turn. And let me check, did I turn these ones? I haven't turned these ones, so I can always go back by selecting my edit sewing tool to double check by selecting the sewing line, and if I see that I haven't changed the sewing line type, I can then just turn ahead. Then switch again to the free sewing tool and check if we are missing any sewing lines. So for the ones that are on the side here, we will omit them for now, and just after we have also superimposed those pieces, stitch those together. So here and here, as well as here and here. So then once the stitchings are done, I can then select my selection tool in the 3D window, unfreeze, so click right on the pattern, unfreeze, and then superimpose. Click right again, superimpose underneath. Now the pattern should be placed. You can simulate to make sure that everything is stable. I can then superimpose the rest of the patterns. So I'm gonna go again, select my free sewing tool, or in some cases, I guess we can also just use the segment sewing tool. So I will go with the segment sewing tool and layer the rest. Here, and then I turn, and then here, and I turn, and again here also, and I turn, and here, and I turn. And I can also do the back already. And I'll turn. And here too. And the top. All right, so once this is done, then we can superimpose those three pieces. I will select my selection tool, select all of those here, then click right on one of them, unfreeze, and click right again and select the option superimpose under. And then simulate to make sure that everything is stable. Then once that is done, we can then finalize by stitching the sides here and there so that it's closed. So I can select again my segment sewing tool and do those last stitchings. And because those are placed on the sides, I do not need to turn my sewing line type. It's only when the pattern is placed underneath through the sewing line. Yep. Here and then like this, and the sides right here. So once that is done, I can simulate to make sure everything is stable. And if I see that it's stable, then I can stop my simulation. Then I can go ahead and layer the last pieces, this one right here. So I can also get ahead and get started with the sewing line. So I will select my free sewing tool and stitch around here and then here. So I prefer to stitch onto the middle layer just because it's going to be more stable than if you were to stitch on the first layer. Because otherwise, if you sandwich a sewing line, it tends to move. So here I will just then change the sewing line type again because I'm placing this layer underneath the second one. And I will do the same with all of the other sewing. Here and then here. And then the bottom one. And I can do already the sides as well. I can switch to my segment sewing tool and then turn. And do the same for the other side. And the back too. And then finally the top here of the back. Oh, and I made it cross, so I do Control B to uncross my sewing lines if they've been crossed. And I think I have most of them, the most important ones. I can also, because as you see here, I have a little opening on the side. So here it's not going to be stitched to that side. So I can stitch this one to the second layer and then turn it. Then I can select my transform pattern tool, select all of those pieces, and then do in the 3D window a click right, unfreeze, and then click right again, superimpose under. Everything should be stable or placed at least nicely, and to make sure that you don't have any problems with collisions, you can then simulate. And it seems to be doing all right. What I did not place yet is going to be those two little pieces. So first I'm going to also again stitch the sides here with the segment sewing tool so that it looks closed from the inside. And here too. And then simulate. And once all of this is stable, I can hide my avatar with Shift A and then work a bit on the inside. So here I'm going to be placing these little pieces inside here to stiffen a bit the opening of the bra. So I will select first, as you see here, we have a baseline. So I will trace it as an internal line by selecting the trace tool or through the trace tool. So I select both baseline from both sides and press enter to transform them into internal lines. Once they are transformed, then I can do the stitching again by selecting my segment sewing and then stitching those on the side. So for the ones that are the stitching line that is stitched on both outline, this one I will need to change the sewing line type to turn. When you're stitching an internal line to a border, you will not need to turn, it will turn automatically because it will take in consideration that on an internal line, automatically you will have your sewing line type turn, or you will press it flat with an iron as if it's in real life. Here, and then here on the other side, and then turn. So once this is done, we can also do the little pieces here. It doesn't need to be done now, but we can still do it. So that way we don't forget. So we'll select the free sewing tool because here we don't have any point to stop. So, and I'm going to stitch those two pieces, two bits together. And here change the sewing line type here to turn. And again here to turn. Here. And then here. Since that is done, we can use this option transform pattern or select move pattern. Then select both pieces here. With the shift key, click right to unfreeze and then click right again to superimpose under or superimpose them over so that they are inside the layer. Up to you however you want to show it, but I will place it over instead. So I will go back to my front and now we can get started by having a look at the breast pad. And then afterwards I will of course change the fabric physical property so that it's a bit more realistic for this type of garment. So to get started with the breast pad, so we will not delete what we've already worked on. What we will just do is deactivate and then hide the pattern so that we can really have a full access to the human body. So with your selection tool, select all of your pattern pieces and then do a click right on one of them and select deactivate pattern and sewing. Then once that is done, you can do another click right and then hide 3D pattern. And now we see the avatar without anything. So in order to start creating those pads, we can, I'm going to show you a tip, a solution. There's multiple ways of doing it, but this is one way of doing so by drawing through the 3D pen avatar tool. So if I select the 3D pen avatar tool, I can then draw the pad and then I will extract it as a pattern. So I can do it for one breast and then duplicate it for the other breast. So I'm going to follow the line of the already existing bra that is on the texture of the skin of the avatar. So I will start here. Then if I want to create a curve, I will press my control key and do a click left like this. Here, if I want to go back to having a point, I just release my control key and then do a click left and then move up at this point. And then here I can add another curve point by clicking on my curve of my control key. And then in order to finish my shape, I will click where I started. And now you see the shape is finished. So usually you will have a seam on the shoulder pad to really catch the curve of the breast. So you will then need to create a line in between so that it can create the proper shape for that pad. So here I will create one like this in between, press my control key if I want to add a curve or make sure that it follows the curve of the breast, and then here press my with my left click. All right. Since we have that, now we can extract those shapes as patterns by using here the flatten tool. So if you select flatten, then you can select both shape. You will see that it's highlighted in blue and then yellow when you click on them, and then press enter to extract them as pattern shape. And here you have them appear in the 2D window. So you can keep them separate if you want, or if you want to modify them so that they feel a bit more like pads, you can also add a point at the middle and then join one of the segments. So here I can add a point. Here click on the select the add point split line tool, and then we will add a point on the middle of that segment here and there. So here I click right and I select the option uniform split and I press OK, and I do the same on the other side. Click right and uniform split. So we could add, for example, we could link the bottom part of the breast pad and then have them as one piece. So I can select my edit pattern tool, select both here, both segments here and there, click right on one of them and select the option merge. And here I have one breast pad. And I could also add a bit of a curve at this here. I will then select my edit curvature tool and curve it a bit more. So here we have the base of our breast pad. I can check if the sewings have been done. No, I see that it's not. So I will then select my segment sewing and stitch both sides here. So don't yet simulate because we have nothing to hold the breast pad. So if you do, it will then fall on the floor. So what I can just suggest is that we will straight up duplicate this pattern for the other breast and then activate again the bra. So here I select it with my selection tool in a 2D window and I do Control D to duplicate it. Or the other option, if you want to find it in the pop-up menu, you do a click right and then a symmetric pattern with sewing. As you see here, you have also the shortcut placed on the side. So I select this and I place it on the other side. And in the 3D window, just readjust the placement so that it fits nicely around the second breast, like this. We will then activate again the rest of the patterns for the bra. So there is a few steps to follow and to make sure to follow in order. So first is I'm going to show again all of the other patterns. So here I select them in the 2D window. I do a click right on one of the pieces and then select the option that is show 3D pattern or shift Q. Now I see that they are present. So as I said, we will try to place the pads inside, in between the third and the second layer. So what I will do is I will use throughout all of those layers the layering tool or layering function in the property editor when you select the pattern. So knowing that 0 means that it's to the closest of the body, so I will keep this layer, which is going to be sandwiching the pad and be close to the breast. I will keep this one to layer 0. Then the pad comes next, so I will place this one on layer 1. And then the rest I will place on layer 2 so that it goes on top of the pad. But first, let's reactivate the patterns. So I will select all of those patterns, and either in the 2D or 3D window, click right on one of them and select the option Activate. Then as I said, so this one will stay as layer 0. Then the pads will go as layer 1, which will then be changed in the property editor after selecting the pads. You always have this message that appears asking, letting you know that you're changing the layers of your pattern. You just need to press OK. And then I will select the rest of the patterns, those two other layers, and then change that here as layer 2 in the property editor. Then press OK. So here, let's see what will happen. So I can hide my avatar so you have a better view on the inside at this stage, and then let's simulate and see how it goes. So it's end up going inside pretty well, and you see that you have it's very stable in terms of the simulation. So I can then stop the simulation and then select all of my patterns at once and then bring everything back to layer 0, which will bring all of the pattern piece again in this white color. So once we've done that, then we have the main construction. We can then start to look into the details and change the fabric physical property. So again, I have prepared a few fabrics already through the fabric library. I just changed a bit of the print and the color to make it a little bit more personalized. So I will go into a fabric folder, which I created for this purpose of the tutorial, and then add those fabrics. So this one I will add to my library. This one as well for the waistband. Then this one for the main part of the bra, and this one for the label, which is this little piece here that I still haven't stitched on, and that has fallen on the ground. So I will stitch it a little bit after. I'll just add the fabric and then stitch it afterwards. Ideally, we would have stitched it before. So here then I will select my waistband and then add the fabric of my waistband, drag and drop it onto my waistband here. Then for the mane, I will select the top part here and place this fabric right here. And the rest here is for the lining on the inside of the fabric. So this one here, and select the rest. I can also maybe, to add a bit of variety, add this fabric on the top here. So once this is done, just to make sure that you calculate the physical properties properly, then simulate. And then yes, you should be able to see that the bra changes a little bit of its drape. I can then stop the simulation. And then also, because as you see here, I do have my fabric for, I do have some pads, but I didn't add any specific physical property. So on the fabric that remains, the fabric 1, I can change the names into pads and add a physical property that kind of fits the purpose of those pads. So I will then go down in the property editor and then in the physical property change the preset into something that I would say fits approximately to those pads, and I will select the trim fusible rigid and then simulate to see how the drape changes. Here we have it. Yes, so then I can go back to my little label and then change and add it to my here. So I will then stitch it with my free sewing tool. Here, and then change the sewing line type into turn so that my label sticks inside my bra. Then I will take my selection tool, click right on the little label that fell on the floor, and then select superimpose under. And then it will be placed underneath. And I can of course change the fabric. So I will select my label fabric, drag and drop it, and then simulate. And you can stop quickly the simulation, as it's just to place this little piece right here. So once we're done with that, we have done the main components of our bra. So then we can make it ready for a high quality render. You can also add some top stitches if you want, or some decoration on top. I will um, not do this so that I make the video concise to the point of constructing this bra. I will then just make sure to change the resolution, as these pattern pieces are quite small, so it is very important to change the particle distance as well as the collision. And there's a little bit of some tricks regarding the pads on in which value you could change the thickness collision. So for all those bras, so instead of, I will not use the high res button, just because with this one changes overall and I want to customize a little bit the resolution of each pattern. So here for all of them already, I'm just going to change everything to a particle distance 5. So I select all of my patterns, and here I change the value of the particle distance to 5. I can then simulate to make sure that everything works out fine. When I see that everything is stable, then I can also change the thickness collision. So this one I will do little by little, one layer by one layer. So I will select first the first layer and change the thickness collision here to 1, like this, and then simulate. As you see, it's important to go little by little just to make sure that it doesn't collide too much. As you see now, it's quite stable, so I can stop the simulation and then select the second layer. And then again, change this collision to 1. So if you're scared that it might collide too much, you can go little by little. So here I can select to 2 and then simulate. If this is then stable, then I can change to 2 to 1.5 and then simulate. And then from 1.5 to 1. And then again simulate. Once this is stable, then we can do the same with our last layer. So here I can again select all of the patterns, change little by little. So I can change here the thickness collision to 2. Once it's stable, then I can select again, change that to 1.5. And then from 1.5 to 1. All right, and it looks stable from all sides. So then we can go on and change the collision of the pads. So because our patterns here at the moment is quite thin, and if you want to add a little bit of thickness on the pad, you would actually do it through the thickness collision. So the more collision you add, then the more thick your pad will appear. So for example, if I want to make it a little bit thicker, around to protect my breast a little bit better, I can change here the value from 2.5 to, let's say, 3, and then simulate, and then 3 to, let's say, 3.5, and I will go like this until 4. Simulate, you see that it's actually growing a little bit the shape, and now I'll change that to 4. And I see, yeah. And you can also, if you want the visual aspect to also have this look of being a bit thicker, you can change that in the thickness rendering. So if your collision is 4, I wouldn't suggest to have a thickness rendering above 4, because otherwise it will look as if the fabric is going through a bit. So I would suggest you can go from anywhere between 0 and 4. So for me, I'm just going to uh, make it thicker and place it to 3. It's not going to change much of the drape because this is just a visual change that you're bringing. And then simulate to make sure again that everything is stable. What will then remain is to change the avatar skin offset as well as the simulation arrow to make it into a fitting mode. So I can bring back the avatar with Shift A and then select the skin of the avatar and make sure that we change this from 3 to 0. Once that is done, you can simulate to make sure that everything is stable. If it is, then that's good. And then the last little thing to make it into a high res mode, you will then change the simulation arrow from normal to fitting. And then simulate and let it sit for a little bit. You will see that it's going to change a bit more due to the elasticity of the fabric. Once you see that it's stable, then you can stop your simulation and then double check around to make sure that everything looks good. Yeah, it seems to be looking good. I will place my camera again on the front view and stop the simulation. And here we go. Here we have our bra. So this is basically the main construction workflow to build this type of bra. Of course, I did not add the top stitch and the graphics, so these are more like material aspects, so I will leave them on the side, but you can of course do it on your own if you want. And let me then share with you the final render where I also added the top stitches and the graphic. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to write in the chat below. Thank you very much for watching.